Hi everyone. So this is going to be more about information I've been downloading. I have been shown how important our roots are, our DNA, our bloodlines are in this particular time that we're living. And I wasn't sure why I was kept being shown, and I went on this whole tangent, days of looking into my roots, my DNA, ancient history, and I couldn't understand what it was about, and it tied in a way, I believe, to the original humans that came, and the play that was set, the theater that was created, and the play that was acted out in ancient times, that has had an effect on us now. So just to go back a little bit, I'm going to skip the whole DNA bloodline part of it. That I may talk about another time, and how it relates to those of us that are actually playing something out right now in the world stage. But what I like to do is I like to speak about the people that I've been listening to is Aluna Ash, Peace Dealer, and Crazy Bull had an interview, and it happened all at the same time as I'm having this other conversation with a friend of mine. So it started out with me having a conversation with a friend of mine about how she, from very early age in her teens, she constantly write down the year 2020. And we're talking about, this is like literally 40 years ago. 2020, and she knew something amazing was going to happen in 2020. And I can't go into the reason why, because I don't know how private it is what she told me. And so I won't go into the exact image of what she got for 2020. But what I downloaded is this. The original humans, when they came in, I think many of us were kind, had kindness. We were still connected to the energy of grace and the energy of unconditional love. And when we started this experiment and we came on Earth and we were given bodies, avatars, and then we started to experiment genetically with generations of offsprings. I think that the initial intent was a good one, but I think at some point there was a division, that there were some people who said, wait a minute, we realize that there's something that we can get out of having people on Earth, beings on Earth, to serve us. But instead of allowing us to exist in grace and unconditional love and harmony, there was something that we're able to get out of it when it was chaos and mayhem and suffering. And so the concept was, this ended up being an experiment, and somehow along the experiment, part of the original people or beings that entered realized that when there was suffering involved, they actually were able to feed from that in a way. Like somehow they were able to empower themselves out of the suffering of others. And so they decided, well, why don't we play out these catastrophes, right? and we could like gain all of this amazing energy, and we can empower ourselves through people suffering. And there was a light side that was saying, hey, you can't do that. These, they're because what happened is part of the way they did this is to give these beings consciousness. That's how they were able to actually siphon the energy, is because the beings had consciousness. So there was a light side that was saying you can't do that. It's cruel. And they had a spark of divinity in them that was also subdued, so that they weren't able to understand how to find their way out of that maze. It's like a labyrinth of sorts. They weren't able to see themselves out of it because they couldn't see beyond the third dimensional vibration and consciousness. So what's happened is this idea of the Olympics. Well, before I go into that, so what happened was these the forces of the dark took over. Obviously, it's been thousands of years that we're in mayhem and craziness, and placed mythology and stories and wove them into the fabric of all the cultures. Like every culture has a stories of grief and sorrow and war and strife and floods and death and pestilence. It's just, and this is like it's kind of like the gods were playing. It's their story. And they probably played it out as well. Like it was not just a story. They played it out. They ingrained it. And it became part of our subconscious. It became something that was so deeply programmed into us that it became our playbook. So we open a book, our lives, we fall madly in love, and then we find a way because all of the stories are programming us to completely tear it apart. So in the possibility of divine sacred love, it ends up being probably one of the most painful experiences we have. And they're like, yay, because we're giving them all of this great energy. So I believe that this year and a half leading up to 2020 is collapsing all those stories, is collapsing all the energies that is it could be possibly raised, siphoned, through us continually playing out these classical stories from mythology. If those stories collapse, then we have a possibility of rewriting our story, right? We could create a whole new mythology, a whole new way of our children finally being able to understand what harmony is, what love is, what compassion and kindness is, that there's no such thing as lack, that we're not have-nots. We actually are manifestors. To understand our truth and weave that into the consciousness of humanity. And that's really what's at stake here. And that's why there's such a rush to 2020. Because if what's happened now is the collapse of the old programming, then we need to program fast. We're going to have all these avatars out there with no programming. I know it's not that simple, because it's not like resetting something or pushing a button. It's not a delete button necessarily, but we need to start to think how to do that. How do we develop a consciousness of harmony? And now I'm thinking about it, as I'm saying it, I'm thinking we do it by 144,000 original beings collaborating in one big project of consciousness. And I've always been talking about the 100th monkey. Like, we are the 100th monkey. It's not 100 monkeys, it's 144,000 monkeys, but but you get what I'm saying. It's The 100th monkey was the monkey. I don't know if you ever heard of the story, but it's once the 100th monkey washed the fruit in the water, it became monkey consciousness. So there's a whole story about the monkeys, and I've been talking about this forever, and now I realize that's what it is. I don't know if it has to be 144,000, but it has to be plenty of us that need to start to vibrate. Maybe it's just us doing our inner work and vibrating at a level of harmony and unconditional love. If all of us do it, then there could be a shift, and then the story could be rewritten. And I have a whole thing about the bloodlines and the DNA, but I don't think that that's as important as this part of it. That is, that we are actually in a galactic war to win the light over the dark. Okay, peeps, that's my story.